It began with the sickening sound of metal against bone. I was in the kitchen rinsing dishes when I heard my husband, Daniel, cry out from the front yard. I dropped the plate in the sink and sprinted outside, my heart hammering, only to find two burly men in dark uniforms slamming him chest first into our ranch gate. The clang echoed down the street. My husband's glasses fell into the dirt, and blood trickled down his temple. The men barked orders in a tone too practiced to be random thugs, but too sloppy to be real cops. And behind them, standing with arms crossed, and that grotesque smirk plastered across her face, was Karen, a self-appointed tyrant of our neighborhood HOA. She shouted at the top of her lungs, "This man is resisting HOA enforcement. We're taking him in for violations." The neighbors, drawn by the commotion, peeked from porches and windows, confusion spreading across their faces. Enforcement? What enforcement? This was a private community, not a police state. But Karen, heavy-set and flushed with power, looked like she had just crowned herself queen of the cul-de-sac. "Get your hands off him," I screamed, running closer. But one of the men raised his palm in a mock gesture of authority. "Ma'am, step back. HOA security business." He failed to comply with neighborhood codes. His badge gleamed under the porch light, but the edges looked plastic, flimsy, the kind you'd buy from a costume shop. My gut twisted. These weren't cops, they were imposters. Daniel groaned as they shoved him harder. His ribs pressed into the iron bars. Rage boiled in my chest. In that moment, I wasn't just a wife, I was a protector. My hand went to my waistband where I carried my Glock 19, the weapon I trained with weekly at the range. The one I swore I'd only use if there was no other choice. Tonight, choice was ripped away from me. I drew the Glock and aimed, my voice cutting through the chaos like a whip. "Step away from my husband. Now." The imposters froze, their eyes widening, suddenly realizing this wasn't the easy intimidation job they'd been promised. Karen shrieked, stumbling back. "She's armed. She's threatening officers." Her words rang false even to herself, but she was too blinded by arrogance to stop. The neighbors gasped. Phones came out, recording every second. One of the fake cops tried to bluff. "Put the gun down or we'll charge you with assaulting an officer." His voice wavered, betraying the crack in his act. I tightened my grip. "You're no officers. Drop him, or I swear you'll regret it." The street went silent, the only sound Daniel's ragged breathing. Then came the twist. From the corner of the block, headlights swept across us, and a real sheriff's cruiser pulled up. Out stepped Deputy Harris, a man I'd known for years, his hand already resting on his sidearm. "What's going on here?" he barked. The imposters stiffened, panic flashing across their faces. Karen pointed wildly at me. "She's the criminal. She's threatening law enforcement." But Harris's eyes narrowed as he scanned the scene, the fake badges, Daniel's bleeding face, my steady stance with the Glock. He saw the truth instantly. "Drop him," Harris ordered, drawing his weapon. The imposter stuttered, then released Daniel, who stumbled into my arms. Harris barked again, badges on the ground, hands where I can see them. They hesitated too long. He advanced, his voice turning lethal. Now, trembling, they peeled off their fake badges and raised their hands. The neighbors erupted in shocked murmurs, phones capturing every detail. Karen's face drained of color as her carefully constructed lie collapsed in real time. Daniel clutched my arm, his voice weak but proud. "They weren't real. I told you. I held him close, my Glock still aimed until Harris cuffed the imposters himself. The sight of their plastic badges glinting uselessly in the grass felt like justice in miniature. But the larger reckoning was still to come. Because Harris turned to Karen, his face dark with fury. "Ma'am, you arranged this?" he asked. She stammered, sweat rolling down her cheek. And no. Two thought they were legitimate contractors. I was told, but Harris cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. You incited an assault. You lied about authority. That's impersonating law enforcement and conspiracy. The crowd gasped again, and Karen's facade shattered. Her bluster, her arrogance, her iron grip on the neighborhood, all of it crumbled beneath the weight of her own scheme. She tried to scream over the voices, but her words drowned in a flood of recordings. Neighbors shouting, "You went too far this time, Karen. And we've had enough of you." Karen's shrill protests echoed against the houses, but the tide had already turned. Neighbors who had once tiptoed around her now stood boldly on their lawns, recording with phones and shouting their anger. For years she had hidden behind her clipboard, drowning the community in fines and threats. But tonight she had shown her true hand. Tonight, she had crossed the line from nuisance into criminal. Deputy Harris shoved the imposters into the back of his cruiser, their fake badges bagged as evidence. He turned his attention back to Karen, who fidgeted nervously, tugging at her robe as though she could somehow shrink inside it. "Ma'am, you're coming with me," he said flatly. Karen flailed, her face crimson. "This is harassment. I was protecting the neighborhood. These men were contractors, not criminals." Harris didn't flinch. "Save it for the judge." But Karen wasn't ready to give up. She turned to the crowd, her eyes wild, searching for sympathy. "Don't you see? I was doing this for all of you." She jabbed her finger toward Daniel, who was still holding his ribs. He's been flaunting his so-called rights, acting like he's above the rules. "I was bringing order." The crowd erupted, not in support, but in outrage. Mr. Alvarez, usually soft-spoken, shouted back, "Order. You just had his head smashed against a gate. That's not order. That's assault." Mrs. Patel chimed in, her voice trembling with fury. "You fined my daughter for sidewalk chalk. Now you're sending fake cops to beat a man. Enough, Karen." Even the teenagers on the block jeered, one yelling, "Enjoy jail, Karen." The humiliation was unbearable to her. She shrieked, "You're all ungrateful. Without me, this place would be a dump." But the more she screamed, the smaller she seemed. Karen, who once loomed like a tyrant, was now just a cornered bully, exposed under the glare of flashing red and blue lights. Harris finally snapped the cuffs around her wrists. She howled, thrashing, but he pushed her toward the second cruiser that had arrived as backup. Neighbors filmed as Karen was stuffed into the back seat, her hair wild, her face twisted. The queen of the cul-de-sac, dethroned in front of her subjects. The investigation moved quickly. The two imposters cracked under pressure within a day, confessing that Karen had hired them with HOA funds, promising them community enforcement pay if they intimidated me and Daniel into compliance. She had even provided them with the fake badges, ordering them online from a prop company. Every detail of her scheme came spilling out, recorded and signed. The news exploded. HOA president arrested for hiring fake cops to assault homeowner blared across headlines. Local TV stations replayed the footage neighbors had captured, Daniel bleeding at the gate, Me with my Glock trained on the imposters. Karen shrieking lies until the sheriff shut her down. The story went viral, drawing outrage far beyond our county. Comment sections lit up with fury at the audacity, and support poured in from strangers who had faced their own HOA nightmares. But the most shocking twist came from the bank records Harris uncovered. Karen hadn't just used HOA funds for her fake police force, she had been siphoning money for years, padding her personal accounts with thousands collected from fines and maintenance fees. The treasurer resigned in shame, admitting Karen had bullied the board into silence. With the fraud laid bare, the HOA was forced to dissolve under state order. Karen's trial was a circus. She waddled into court in an ill-fitting suit, her once defiant glare now shaky and desperate. She pleaded innocence, claimed she'd been tricked by the imposters, painted herself as the victim of a vendetta. But the evidence was overwhelming: the receipts for the fake badges, the bank transfers, the imposters' testimonies, and above all, the video footage of that night. When the prosecutor replayed the clip of her shrieking, "This man is resisting HOA enforcement," the courtroom erupted in gasps and laughter. The judge, unimpressed by her theatrics, delivered a scathing verdict. "You weaponized fear and deception against your neighbors. You incited violence under the guise of authority. This court will not tolerate such abuse of power." Karen was sentenced to 5 years in prison for conspiracy, fraud, and impersonation charges, with additional restitution owed to every family she had fined. As the gavel came down, Karen broke down sobbing, begging for mercy, but no one listened. The same neighbors she had tormented for years stood in the gallery, arms crossed, their faces hard with satisfaction. She was let out in shackles. Her reign finally ended. Life after Karen was different. The neighborhood, once stifled by her iron grip, blossomed with new life. Children drew chalk art on sidewalks without fear. Families decorated for holidays however they pleased. Barbecues and block parties returned, laughter echoing where silence once reigned. People who had avoided each other for years now shared meals and stories, united by the victory over a common tyrant. Daniel healed slowly, his ribs bruised but his spirit unbroken. Every time I looked at him, I remembered the rage I felt that night, the cold steel of my Glock steady in my hands. I never wanted to use it, but knowing I could stand between him and danger, that gave me strength. Neighbors often stopped me to thank me, saying my courage had been the spark that finally toppled Karen. But I always corrected them. It wasn't just me. It was all of you's very neighbor who had lived in fear, finally saying, "Enough." Months later, the HOA's old office was converted into a community center. At its grand opening, Mr. Alvarez raised a toast to standing together, to never letting fear rule us again, and to the night we saw justice served. The crowd erupted in cheers, clinking glasses, kids running between legs, dogs barking happily. I stood there, hand in Daniel's, my heart full. Karen's name became nothing more than a bitter memory, a cautionary tale whispered with a mix of laughter and disbelief. Sometimes new neighbors would ask, "Who was she really?" And the old ones would smirk, shake their heads, and say, "Just a bully who thought she was the law until the law came for her." I still keep the Glock close, not out of paranoia, but as a reminder, not just of that night, but of what it means to protect what's yours, to draw a line no one can cross, no matter how much they think they own you. And every time I walk past the gate where Daniel was slammed, I pause. The dents are still there, etched into the metal like scars. We could have fixed it, but we didn't. Because those dents aren't just marks of violence, theory, proof of resilience. Proof that we stood our ground. So now I ask you, was I right to draw my Glock that night? Or should I have waited for help to arrive? Was justice served in the way Karen fell? Or do you think her punishment should have been even harsher for the fear she spread?